Welcome to Retirementals, a podcast that dives headfirst into the issues facing the financial sector at the intersection of investment, technology and financial advice. Hosted by Abraham Okusanya, you can expect raw honesty, critical analysis and energetic interviews. Here is your host, Abraham Okusanya.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Retirementals, and I am really delighted to introduce my guest today. He's known to many of you, is one of those leaders and stalwarts of our profession, Tina Weeks of Serenity Financial Planning. Hi Tina, welcome to Retirementals.
Hi, Abraham. Thanks so much for having me. Lovely to speak to you today.
It's great to have you on the podcast. You're a big advocate of life planning, and you're a cancer survivor. So I am really, really grateful for your time to unpack the journey that you've been on over the last couple of years. But for anyone who might have been living under the rock, as I say, do you want to give us a little bit of an introduction to how you got into the industry or the profession, and give us a sense of the journey you've been on?
Absolutely. So I'm Tina Weeks. I run Serenity Financial Planning. We're a firm of what we like to call financial life planners. And our vision is to bring financial life planning to as many people as possible so they can live a life of freedom without worrying about money. That's certainly a big part of the way we work. For many, many years now, I realized that working with clients in a relational way, i.e. building really strong relationships, taking them through a life planning or coaching process, although it's not that rigid, it's purely about building relationships, but taking them through that allowed people to see a different way of living, a different way of being with their money, and really opened up possibilities for them. And that word freedom becomes so much more important when you have those sorts of conversations. So Serenity's been working in that way for many years now, and we're really proud of that. I have nothing against different ways of working in our profession, absolutely not. But for us, this has really worked. It fires us up. It's all about our purpose, and to see the difference in people is just amazing. I've always said it's contagious, actually. When you work with people and you can see them shifting, you can see them seeing things they couldn't see before. You see them living in a different way. It really is contagious. It changes you as well, and I love it.
So I don't know if you remember this. I think my very first interaction with you it must be 7 years ago or so, and you were holding this event with at UBS with George Kinder, and the idea at the time was to spread life planning more broadly within financial services. And I can remember sort of sitting there and thinking to myself, what is the alternative? What is the other way of doing financial planning if it's not led by what people are trying to accomplish? So are you able to just give, a sense of how the way you operate, what you do is different than the traditional advisor would work?
Well, it absolutely is about what people are trying to accomplish. It just doesn't have such a strong focus on money being the driver of those conversations. And whilst money is certainly a protagonist in many of the conversations, we approach those conversations around money in a different way. We talk about people's relationship with money, what money means to them, how it affects their decision making. And actually, people's relationship with money affects their relationship with so many aspects of their life. What we don't do is spend, look at it from a traditional way where we either look to ensure that clients have any missing products put in place for them, or even spend a lot of time analyzing and dissecting portfolios, components of portfolios, returns, those sorts of conversations. Very few people find interesting. And whilst important, we limit those conversations. We bring them in as required, but they're certainly not the focus. The focus is always the relationship we have with our clients and how we can help them move forward positively. A lot of what we do is helping them see what's possible for them. Sometimes they can't see that with a little bit of guidance, and that's where we come in.
So do you want to give us a sense of where Serenity is today, the team, clients? Give us a sense of the business today.
Well, we're still a relatively small firm. There are about 10 people in the business. We still have locations in various geographical locations. Client-wise, we're moving more and more to clients that are owned by the business. Whilst I appreciate a client can never be owned, of course, but clients of the business rather than a group of self-employed advisors, which is actually how we started off. And now really we're looking at it from a business point of view and how, as a team, we look after and provide world-class service to those clients. So yeah, it's all going well, and it's been a very interesting year whilst we've been in lockdown, for certain. But we feel really lucky that it hasn't really impacted us. And a lot of firms where the clients and the relationship with those clients is at the core haven't really felt the effect, I hope, of COVID and what's happened over the last couple of years. Our business doesn't rely on trying to bring in initial fees all the time. And once you work away from that model, and actually what you have is a group of clients that you want to help, you want to work with long term, and that is the focus. Changes that we've seen over the last year don't really affect us.
Now, a word from our sponsor. Nikki Heaton-Jones is the Managing Director and the Chief Investment Officer at Betafolio, the high-tech, low-cost, discretionary model portfolio manager. Typical model portfolio service costs about 36 basis points. That's in addition to the funds, the platform, the advice fees. Tell us a bit about Betafolio's view and approach on fees.
Well, I don't think anyone that knows us already, Abraham, would be surprised to hear me say that in a nutshell, MPS fees are too high. If you include the fund charges and the platform fee that you already talked about, we get close to 1%, I think, on average for a lot of retail clients. And that's before they start paying for the financial plan, which is the part of the service that will ultimately add the most value for them in their advisor relationship and experience. My view on fees and Betafolio's view on fees is that they have a real impact on client outcomes that needs attention. And that's why we're building a scalable solution with technology that will allow us to keep costs low. And I think we also should consider the impact of these fees on advisors' businesses too. Advisors need to make a profit from their work. They need to have a viable business, and their cost bases have been rising because of regulation, and the more costs they have to pass through to their clients for overcomplicated services in turn puts pressure on the advisor's own fees and ultimately makes it not possible for them to run a good business. So fees are really crucial, and I'm really happy that we're in a position to be having a positive influence on the trends in the market.
Good stuff. Thank you, Nikki. So give us an idea of why and how you pivoted the business away from, the self-employed advisor model into, a model where the business, as you say, own the client and everybody is pulling together to serve those clients.
I think it's been a
Why did
natural.
you and how did you? Go
I
on,
think it's
sorry.
been a bit of a natural progression, actually, Abraham. When I started, and I didn't have any clients or any possibility really to grow at that time, apart from my own efforts, I knew that if I could bring people in to work with me, it would be great. But because I couldn't bring in advisors on an employed basis at that time, because I couldn't offer them a client bank to work with, the only alternative at that point was the self-employed model, which worked really well for me. The trick I found was to find people where we shared values and beliefs, where we were aligned in that way, so that actually we all worked in the same way. We still have 2 self-employed advisors, and they're really, they're stalwarts of the company. They're here hopefully forever. But at the time, it was an opportunity for me to increase cash flow, to create that team working environment, to create systems and processes that could be replicable regardless of the situation the advisor was in, self-employed or employed. And actually, it really helped me set the foundation for how I wanted to grow the business. And then as we grew, what I found was that the more and more clients the business obtained for itself, and we did that mainly through organic growth, referrals from clients, social media, etc., and acquisition, rather than relationships with professional introducers, which I was never very good at. But as we found that the business grew in that way, we found that we needed more advisors to come in and help, and that's when we were able to introduce the employed advisor model.
Fascinating
so so far it's gone really well.
Brilliant. So I am very what's the word, conscious of this. So this is totally down to you. Are you said to me that you're prepared to talk about your battle against this horrible illness, cancer. So I'm just going to set it up and shut up. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, yes, I'm definitely happy to talk about it. In fact, I have done quite a bit already. But I am conscious that, you just said, you used the words cancer survivor, and I don't feel like that in any way at all. Firstly, because my situation is that cancer wasn't the main illness that I was fighting. I have myeloma, early stage myeloma, but that was never the issue for me. The problem was that my myeloma triggered a very, very, very rare illness called acquired cutis laxa. And this illness is a connective tissue disorder. And what it does is it destroys the elastin in your body. And for me, it affected 2 main areas. That's my skin and hence my appearance. But more worryingly, it affected my internal organs, with my lungs being the most affected. Actually, we need elastin for so many bodily functions that we don't realize. So when elastin is removed from your body, it has dire consequences. And for me, that led to severe damage of my lungs. So I have emphysema now quite badly. And the problem I have was that doctors just didn't know of this illness. In fact, I'm the first person in the UK to be treated for it. And this time last year, after seeing some really rapid decline of lung function, things were looking pretty bad for me. And with no known treatment, we decided to, having read some research, and I was lucky I had some amazing doctors who were happy to humour me and look at all of the research I'd put together. And they'd done their own as well, which was fantastic. But we agreed that there was some sort of connection between the myeloma and the acquired cutis laxa. And if we treated the myeloma, even though it was early stage myeloma, which isn't normally treated, that we would try and halt the damage that this illness was causing to my body. And so I've been on chemo for a year now. I certainly wouldn't say that I'm out of the woods. I think this is going to be a lifelong, and I hesitate to use the word battle because, I don't want people that are ill to feel like they have a battle. This is something that your body's going through, and I'm trying to do it in alignment with my body rather than fighting against my body. It upsets me sometimes when people say so-and-so won their battle with cancer or didn't win their battle with cancer, as though those people that didn't win failed in some way. It doesn't feel like that to me as well. So I do feel like I have a lifelong relationship with what's going on for me. But luckily, after a year of quite a few ups and downs, a year of being on weekly chemo, which has been exhausting to say the least, let alone all the side effects. Those that have gone through this sort of treatment know that the side effects are horrendous, including fatigue like I have never experienced before. But a year on, after weekly chemo, we've seen some sort of stability. So I'm really happy about that. We're not seeing the rapid decline of lung function that we did before, and they've moved me now to chemo every other week, and I'm so pleased about that because I get to have every other week where I'm able to function more than the chemo weeks. So I'm really happy about it, but it certainly has been an adventure, Abraham, if nothing else. It's taught me so much about, I guess, the things that are really important, and also helped me see the things that aren't important. How much time we all waste on the things that really aren't important and really don't make a difference. How much time we all spend worrying about insignificant things, and how that worry impacts the quality of our life, when actually all of it is just the stories we make up in our head about what we think and how we look at what might be going on, not actually what's going on.
So how has this changed your perspective in terms of financial planning?
Oh, massively. And mainly I think because, financial planning, when you look at it, isn't just a small piece of the puzzle that focuses on money. I think we're privileged to do this work with clients, and actually it encompasses so many areas of people's lives. So when I look at it from my perspective, it helped me look at things differently, not just around financial planning and money, but how financial planning fits into the bigger scheme of things, how actually, life is the big conversation here that we have around financial planning. And financial planning is really the tool that we use to help people live the best life that they can. But for me, it was really interesting. If I focus just purely on the money side first, I realized that here I was, after many, many years of struggling financially, in a really good financial position. And now I'm thinking about how can I pass that wealth on to my children, my beneficiaries, in a way that was effective. And whilst I have absolutely no problem paying my fair share of tax, here I was now trying to look at how can I navigate the inheritance tax that would be due on my estate in a way that allowed my beneficiaries to, one, have access to sufficient assets to pay the tax in the first place, but also things like, I have a property at the moment with a mortgage. I have to make sure that there is sufficient cash for the mortgage to be paid off if I want my children to carry on living in the property. So lots of things like that, and lots of exploration around issues that normally a 51-year-old healthy person wouldn't have to think about. When we talk to our clients, that sort of age, legacy is important, but it's not the primary conversation point in financial planning. So I started looking at ways to make sure I didn't leave a mess, basically. And as a financial planner, I did walk the walk. I did have wills and LPAs in place. I did utilize the tax wrappers in the most effective way. But now I was looking at it with fresh eyes. And it was interesting, actually, from a wills and power of attorney point of view, that if I started looking at it from the executors and the trustees' point of view, as well as the beneficiaries, there were things that I needed to change, things that I needed to make sure were easier for people to deal with. You know, we all make a will, we quote what we want to happen, but the practicality of that actually happening needs a little bit more thought when it feels like that might happen imminently. And certainly over the last year, there were 3 or 4 occasions where we thought that my chemo wasn't working, and that, you know, I didn't even have the 2-year period that you would need to consider, you know, an AIM portfolio or any other BR investment that would need a 2-year clock ticking as soon as possible and getting to the end point, you know, in time. So, you know, there have been some hairy moments, and it really made me question everything I know about financial planning and how to practically apply it in a way that I've not really had to do for clients. I've not really had to work with many clients who are seriously ill to the point where we're looking at trying to tidy up and make the best of what they got in a limited time. Of course, there were some obvious things, like, you know, making sure that as much as possible was in pensions. We all know that pensions are outside of your estate for inheritance tax purposes, but also starting to look at what I could transfer to my children, at least in an effective way. I didn't feel I had access to a 7-year time frame for potentially exempt transfers. So I was looking at transferring as much as I could through making payments out of expenditure. So payments out of excess income, rather, so that my beneficiaries could have that in their name without it being an inheritance tax issue. I mean, actually, that's something that I wish so many more people used. You know, you can give as much as you like to as many people as you like, and as long as it's payments out of leftover income, so to speak, and it doesn't affect your lifestyle, it doesn't count for inheritance tax purposes. So that was something really good that gave me some comfort that I could actually do something. But yeah, it's shown me that as practitioners, we have to be really flexible to be able to help clients in a different way if their life changes. We've talked a few times about clients going through various transitions. You know, if we've thought about, you know, divorce, retirement, all those sorts of things, but I don't think personally I've really thought about the practicalities and what's involved when people might be at the end of their life. And a big part of that is the psychological impact. It really does affect the way you think when suddenly you feel you might not be around for much longer.
And thank you, Tina, for being so honest about this. I still have a few questions on this, so please forgive me. I might not be asking the right questions, but I almost feel like, and again, correct me, you know, if I'm wrong, I probably am. That there are 2 parts, the 2 sides to this, you know. So the sort of things that, you know, you know, an individual needs to do, right? Just before a major life event like this happens. And part of the problem is that we don't know if we're going to we're going to encounter this type of event in our lives. So I guess the question there is, what are the things that you did that turned out to be actually a great help when you confronted the illness, or when you knew you were facing the illness, and what are the things that you wish you had done. And then equally on the, I know I'm using the wrong term, on the other side of it, now now that you know where you are, you've talked a little bit about trying to change things and plan a different phase of the planning. So do you want to talk about the side of it before you knew? What are the things that you did, or that you wish you had done, before you had to face the illness?
Well, the most interesting thing actually is the fact that financial planning is not prescriptive, and often we're dealing with so much uncertainty and unknowns, and we're trying to prepare for all eventualities and we just don't know what's going to happen. And we spend so much time with clients trying to help them live the best life they can now and to prepare for retirement. And if we were looking at the flip side of that, i.e. they didn't have much life and they weren't going to get to retirement, we would have to look at changing so much of their financial planning. But if we did that, and certainly in my case where things, I wasn't given a definite terminal diagnosis, it was up and down the whole time. The uncertainty of, you're going to die, you're not going to die was there constantly for me. But it meant that I was really cautious and quite worried about making decisions based on dying and then not dying, or not making decisions that then I did die and I hadn't accounted for. For example, if you start thinking that you want to gift away as much as you can, but then you need that money, you sort of struggling. Or I think the closest before is that when we talk to clients, we're always looking at, for example, if in later life they might need long-term care that they wish to fund themselves, how do we do that? And how do we balance that with the fact that they might want to spend that money in retirement and live their life? We're always looking at that balance of how we can find a way to cover both of those requirements in a way where one doesn't compromise the other. But for me, it really was a dilemma, actually. For example, I thought if I am going to be looking at transferring some of my investments to an AIM portfolio, making sure it was a qualifying AIM portfolio. But if I was going to do that, I would have to crystallize my assets and realize a capital gains tax liability. So I had to weigh it up. Do I want to pay the tax now to move into a type of investment that didn't match my belief system around investing, that didn't quite fit it? It wouldn't be one that I would choose. It isn't how I invest my money, or have invested my money not thinking that I had a long life ahead of me. But that's one of the dilemmas that I had. Do I make this decision now, knowing that and hoping that, touch wood, I'm okay? But what I've done is I've compromised myself financially to try and prepare for an eventuality that I wasn't sure would happen. So yeah, dilemmas like that. It's a difficult one. You just have to make the best decision you can at the time. And I sort of went for a halfway house in the end. I didn't actually put the AIM portfolio in place. I focused more on making sure I had as much as I can in my pensions and gifting. So removing from my estate in that way. But yeah, it was really interesting. But for me, I found it fascinating, actually, Abraham, how I was looking at it now with different eyes and what it meant for me in my conversations with clients going forward. And being conscious that I don't bring my situation too forcefully into a client conversation. I don't want clients to not feel that they've got a life ahead of them and to live their best life, whilst at the same time considering what could happen because the truth is, none of us know what could happen. None of us know how much time we've got left. And the thing is, we all think we have enough time. We'll sort stuff out a bit later on. We'll look at our situations with the perspective that I've just described later down the line. We don't need to rush it. We've got plenty of time. And I think it's made it clearer to me that we do need to consider this sort of eventuality. I've been a big proponent of insurance for many years and making sure that people had the insurance they had in place, but actually looking at how they can change their investments and their situation in general around not an assumption, but a possibility that they might not be around as long as, we hope that everyone will be. And just making sure that they don't leave a mess. That was what was important to me. I didn't want the people that were left behind to have to deal with things that they didn't have to. Dealing with death and dealing with bereavement is hard enough without people worrying about how they're going to deal with what you've left behind. For example, I had to look at the paperwork that's involved, paperwork that executors need to deal with on death. And I looked at the IHT 400 form. I don't know if you've looked at it at all, Abraham. It's not that long a form, and it asks quite a few questions, and you think, oh, this isn't too bad. But then every question, if you say yes, it spins off into another form. So you could end up with many, many forms that you fill in. And when I was looking at it, I was asking myself, where would my executors find the answer to that question? How am I going to make it easy for them to fill in this form? I would strongly recommend that everyone downloads that form and fills it in for themselves. I'm not trying to be morbid, I'm just trying to be realistic. If someone had to fill in that form for you, where would they get the answers to all of those questions? Have you made it easy? Everyone should have a gift register, even if it says on the gift register, no gifts made, because it just confirms and makes it easy to answer that question. And if there are gifts made, to enter them on the gift register and categorize them. This is a gift that would be subject to the 7-year rule. This is a gift that came out of excess income, so that it's easy for your executors to answer those questions. So I've been doing things like that I didn't do before, that I'd really like to introduce and make part of the financial planning work that we do with clients.
Mm-hmm. So in all of this, there is obviously clearly a business that has, team members, employees, and clients and revenue, and you are the owner and manager of this business. Can you talk a little bit more about how you managed or what you did with the business, and are doing with the business, but especially in the period that you were going through the weekly chemo?
Yeah, well, I'm still on chemo, but every other week. But yeah, I was really lucky because I realized quite a few years ago that it was really important that I try and extract myself from the business so that the business worked really well without me. I'd passed over my clients to another advisor. I'd created a management team that had quite a lot of responsibility, and it all came good in that year where, not only were we dealing with a pandemic and the changes that brought, but also the fact that I wasn't as available as I normally was. Every Monday's my chemo day. Every Monday I'd be in hospital, and every Tuesday would be my biggest recovery day. And then Sundays, for the rest of the week, I might not be well either. But I felt so privileged and lucky to work with such an amazing team of people, and everybody stepped up. The management team in particular really did step up. They took on much more responsibility. They took things forward. They drove things forward. And And I felt that I could just take a step back and focus on my treatment. And whilst I worked as much as I could, I didn't feel that pressure that I would have had to feel if the business relied on me, if the business really, really needed me to keep going. And that's been such a godsend, absolutely.
So, has this changed any of your views in terms of the, going forward in terms of the ownership structure of the business? What is the word they use? Uh, Longevity of the business in terms of, what happens to this business eventually?
Well, that's a really, really good question, Abraham. And I think lots of people in my situation think about it all the time. Without a doubt, this is a business that I want to continue. And whilst I'm not precious about the branding or anything like that, it would be a shame if this amazing work that we're doing with clients doesn't continue in some form or another. I would really like to change the ownership. I'm 100% owner right now, to include the amazing team of people that I work with. I haven't quite decided the best way of doing that right now, whether it be through direct ownership of equity or something like an employee ownership trust. I'm looking into all of these options, and I would like, as soon as it's possible, to introduce something that really brings everyone in and makes sure that people can see how valued and how important they are and how they can contribute to the longevity of the business. There's only so much one person can do, and whilst a big part of my role is strategy and driving the business forward, it turns out that other people are good at that too. So,
Right.
so it's really good that other people can step in and take on those roles. And of course, I want people to be appreciated and compensated for that.
No, it's really fascinating, and I know we're talking about this, right, in terms of um, you know in terms of this coming up, as a result, or I don't know, as a result. I don't know how to talk about this. You can tell, right? I don't know. And this is, sorry, I'm going to digress. This is the question, Tina.
Well, before you ask me
Sorry, go
any
on.
more questions, Abraham, can I just ask you,
Yes.
what is it you're feeling
Yes.
uncomfortable about right now? Is it the fact that I was ill, or that I was close to death, Simon? Is it death that you're uncomfortable with, or illness? What is it?
It's all of it, right? I don't know how I don't know how we should be talking to someone who is going through a major illness in their lives. They're obviously they're obviously doing the best they can, still working, but we know there's an illness that I really don't know what to say. I don't know how to have the conversation without sounding, and that is the point, without sounding insensitive or not really appreciating the challenge and the difficulty of what they're facing.
That's such an honest response. Thank you so much, Abraham. And I think you're not the only one that struggles with that. I think as a society, we all struggle with talking about death and illness, even though it's inevitable, certainly death for every one of us. I guess my advice in that situation would be to take the lead of the person that you're talking to. So you can see that I'm very open about it. I'm very happy to talk about any aspect of my experience. I'm also happy to use the word death to talk about what it feels like to have death knocking at your door. I'm comfortable with all of that, but I appreciate that not everybody is. And so maybe, initially just a question like, are you comfortable talking about your experience with me, would cover it for you. And if I said, no, not really, I'm still struggling with it myself, I still find it difficult myself to comprehend and to accept, then you would know to maybe back off. But for people like me who are open, then seeing you feel open as well and feel comfortable asking questions that you want the answers to, then that helps. It helps for me to be able to help you get the answers that you want for these questions. And sometimes with people, it's just a case of you letting them know that you're there, that you can provide support if needed, but not that there's this secret taboo thing that should be swept under the carpet and not talked about. I think certainly as a society, if we could introduce a bit more, be a bit more relaxed about those conversations, it would make it so much easier, not just to talk about them, but also for those struggling through them to feel that people understand and that they have that support.
Thank you. That's very, very helpful. So the question I was going to ask you, or the point I was going to make actually, is that people, we're talking about, succession planning and what happens to the business, right? Eventually, right? In the context of, your illness and how that's changed your perspective. But I feel that this is a conversation that any business owner should be having, right? I was at yesterday, right? And I was talking to people who are building businesses in financial planning, right? And one of the questions I ask people is, well, what do you do with these things eventually, right? And I feel that, this is, this, regardless of where we are on our journey, you start a business, it's established, right? I feel that it has a big impact on the future of the profession, right? One of the reasons why there are all these consolidators going around buying advisor firms and, all the problems that come with that is because, financial planning businesses don't have, the succession path as you would have in a professional service business where new partners buy the old ones out, but the legacy of the firm and their professionalism continues. And it was really heartwarming for me when you said, well, you'll be great, and I agree, for the work that you've done, the business, the entity that you've created, to continue in some shape or form. It might be part of another entity, it might be taken over by the people who own the people who work in the business. But I feel really, really strongly about that.
That's such an important question, Abraham. And before I was ill, my plan was always to build a succession plan from within, and I was on that path. But again, I assumed that I would have time to do that. We all assume that we have enough time to do these things. It's always something that will happen at some point in the future. And the truth is, none of us know how much time we have. And if we want our businesses to be successful without us, we need to start making plans well in advance. I think we all know other financial planner business owners, just recently, quite a few that have either died or suffered severe illness, and their business has been really compromised. Making plans in advance on the assumption that something might happen and hoping that it doesn't seems to definitely be, the best way of looking at it. I first came across this a few years ago when a very good friend of mine, Hannah Foxley, died. We'd been talking about working together. She was an amazing up-and-coming financial planner. She was building a great business. And unfortunately for her, her cancer came back a second time and she was gone within weeks, literally. And whilst we'd been talking about working together, we hadn't actually made any serious plans. And what Hannah did was literally write a letter to her clients on her deathbed saying, I'm going to be passing you over to Tina, and Tina will be looking after you. The reality was that these clients didn't know who I was. They'd not been previously introduced to me. And whilst quite a few of them stayed with me, the majority ended up going elsewhere because they were able to take recommendations from other people that were close to them, that they knew, and that's completely understandable. So, that taught me a lot. And even to this day, some of Hannah's clients that I look after say that one of the reasons they were happy to come to me, because it wasn't just me, that there were other financial planners in the business. But, on a bigger note, if I am the sole owner of this business and I'm not here, what happens to the business? What do I need to do right now to prepare the business to ensure that success is more likely, even though, we can touch wood and hope for the best that eventuality never arises? What can I do now to make sure that the business still runs without me? And actually that I have a framework, a structure in place for people to inherit that business and keep growing it and taking it forward. I would urge everybody who thinks that this is something that they don't need to deal with now, just to have a think. If the worst happens, what happens to your business? Really, what happens to your business? Tomorrow morning, they wake up and they don't have you. How does the business carry on?
I agree. It's such an important subject, right? That and one that I feel has a big impact on the future of our profession. That financial planners some financial planners, not all, of course, create outstanding businesses, um, and that the businesses should have a structure, regardless of what's going on with your health and life, should have a structure in place that enables the work to outlast the the founders, or the current owners. That might be, as we see in other professional services, law firms and others, where current new partners come in and they take over from the new one, that sort of thing. But we need that sort of model, otherwise we end up with this situation where, in the worst case scenario, the owners of the businesses pass on, and huge amount of value can be destroyed in that process. Wealth can be destroyed in that process, or financial planners selling out to large consolidators and things like that. So yeah, no, I think it's really important. So anyway, you're not a woman to rest on your laurels at all, right? And and whilst you are you're dealing with this illness, you're managing a financial planning business. That's not enough. You've got this coaching and training for advisors going on. Talk a little bit about that and how that came about.
Well, actually, this is something that really means a lot to me. It's something that fires me up, gets me excited, and people have heard me for years talking about how working with your clients in a life planning and coaching way is absolutely the most fulfilling and fun way to work, without even taking into account the difference it makes to your clients, the difference it makes to people and how they live their lives. And I've always wanted to deliver my own methodology, a training program that allows other financial planners to deliver this, to be able to work in this way, to get to feel so much of the joy that I have felt working in this way. And throughout lockdown, alongside a business partner at the time, we launched Know Thyself Coaching and Consulting, and the first cohort of the certificate in relational financial planning started on the 3rd of September 2020. We've run 3 cohorts since, and whilst the relationship with my business partner didn't work out, I'm now in the situation where at some points toyed with whether or not, do I continue the business? Do I not? Because I'm now doing this on my own. And is it something that I want to do when I'm really in this situation with my health? And actually, it was my sister that helped me, get some clarity around that. She said, whenever you talk about know thyself, whenever you share with us the successes, the difference it's made to the people that have gone through that training, she says, you light up, you have more energy. We can tell that it means so much to you. And she was right. And that's why I'm going to give myself a little bit more time just to get myself a little bit healthier. But I definitely will be running the courses again in 2022. So watch this space, everybody. I'm looking forward to welcoming more and more people to the Know Thyself Academy. There's a Facebook group that everyone's welcome to join. But this way of working and being able to help my peers and other financial planners learn this way of working, it just gives me so much joy and so much satisfaction, and is definitely something I want to carry on doing alongside Serenity.
Fantastic stuff. Tina Weeks, thank you very much for your honesty, for your time, for your wisdom, for the incredible work that you do in our profession. And I am really, really keen to see what comes next. I'm really excited about the future. And, I will definitely be shouting and spreading the word about Know Thyself, coaching and training when that comes up again. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Abraham. I really enjoyed chatting to you. Thank you.
I'll be remiss if I don't thank my incredible team who worked very hard to put this program together, led by my producer, Hannah Dickinson. Thank you very much, guys. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Timeline App, the retirement planning software, and Batefolio, the high-tech, low-cost flat fee model portfolio manager. And to you, our listeners, thank you for your time. I hope you've had as much fun listening to the program as we have making it. You can find more about the show at retirementals.co.uk, and you can follow me on Twitter. My handle is Abraham on Money. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.